every so often I get sent something to take a look at, and in this case it's a camcorder, and this is why I always tell people don't buy used camcorders, because these things were junk when they were new. They were always the most problematic piece of equipment that anybody ever owned was a camcorder, and they have not gotten better with age. Got sent a Panasonic camcorder to look at, and while I'm working on it, capacitor started to fail. It shut down. This thing's junk. Check it out. Okay, this one took a while to get here, but the complaint on it is it plays for 3 seconds and stops. So let's just turn it on and see. I'm thinking it's probably not either the tape sensor's not working, or it's not taking up the tape and it's shutting down. So let's just remove the tape. There's a tape in it now, and see whether the reels are turning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the screws that hold the cover on, just so I can observe what's happening when it's operating. So we'll remove these 2 screws. And that way I'll be able to load a tape and just observe what's happening. I think I can take this off on these ones. There we go. Okay, now I should be able to load the tape, close this down, and kind of observe. I guess I can't see in the mechanism on this one, just the way it's laid out. But let's just see whether anything moves. Note the grinding sound when it goes into play. Okay, it's shut down. Looks like the tape is spooling back in. I'm thinking that the tape cup is not turning, and that's why it's going into shutdown. That's my initial thought anyway, is that the take-up spool is not turning. It's driven by a little gear over on this side. But it's impossible to see. It's impossible to see what's going on when the camera is all together. Oh, it's got a remote control. Little remote control comes with it, with a little storage unit in the back. I'm just looking at the gear here to see if there's any debris in any of the teeth. I'm gonna have to take this thing apart, I think, to get into it. See if I can see what's going on in this mechanism. These are always fun to work on because they're crammed. You think an 8mm camcorder is crammed. Try a VHSc camcorder. They are even worse. The pendulum gear here, when it turns, it should, depending on the direction of the motor, it should turn this gear, which it is. So I wonder why it's, I think it's sticking from the way that the thing's behaving. Let's see if I can observe this thing again. And it's now not doing it. it's now playing. I get a sneaking suspicion that something right in here with this pendulum gear is sticking. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little gear here that there's a little pendulum gear here on the arm here. I don't know if you can see that or not. That little gear here. This is what drives this take up. This is the drive gear over here that meshes with the tape. And I'm thinking that was sticking. There's a spring here that doesn't look like it's in the right position. That may have been jamming it. The spring fits in that little groove right there. This gear here, when it turns one direction, you see, I don't know if you guys can see. Can you see this gear down here? When this turns one direction, it turns that gear. You can see the gear turning. That's what turns the take up for the tape. And when it turns the other direction, it transfers power over to the other hub. I'm thinking something in here was jamming this little pendulum gear, and when I was moving it manually, I basically freed it up. But this little spring here also wasn't in position. It was sitting up against, it normally rides in a little track. What this little spring does down here, I don't know if I can get a better shot of this or not, but this little spring here was sitting too low. And it was sitting up against the teeth of the gear. And that may have been all that was jamming it. So that when this tried to turn the little nylon gear here, it was jammed. And all I did was I just positioned this little spring. There's a little groove that it sits in. And all that little spring there is for is just to put a little bit of resistance on this idler. This is the idler that meshes with the edge of the tape, the take-up spool on the edge of the tape. The normal operation, when the capstan motor turns this direction, which is the forward direction, it turns that take-up gear. And when it goes the other direction, it turns the other way. It turns the supply side like that. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple mechanism. And what can happen is this little arm can get stuck. Sometimes this little arm gets bent too. But this little arm can get stuck, and then it doesn't transfer power one way or the other. And when that happens, there's a rotation sensor on here that determines whether it's actually turning or not. If it doesn't turn, it goes into shutdown mode. And of course, what that's meshing with is that's meshing with this gear here. When the cassette is placed into the unit, there's a pin that goes in there that releases. There's a brake on here to stop this from turning. Right? It only lets it go one way. It stops it from turning. When you put the tape in, it releases that so that this reel can turn freely. This is the take-up spool. If this doesn't turn, it's going to shut down right away, because otherwise the tape is going to end up all over the inside of the camera. So that is that's a monitored hub. See if it's working now again. Notice how quiet it's turning now. Is the first time I tried it, it was making a grinding noise. And now this thing appears to be working, and there's a picture, but it's not a good picture. Looks like there's an alignment problem. And I can plug this into my TV and we can see what the picture looks like. But it looks like there's an alignment problem on the tape, so I got to take care of that. Let's take a look at the picture. As you can see, there is a problem with this. Now what I don't know is I don't know whether the problem is the camera is out of alignment. I'm sure that it is, or that the tape was recorded incorrectly. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to take this tape, I'm going to put it into a playback machine and look at the tape and see whether the tape is normal, is recorded normally. Because if the tape is out of alignment, there's no point in trying to align the camera to the tape. But if the tape is normal, then we know that the problem is the camera itself is out of alignment. Got my playback. Problem with these playbacks is that the battery sometimes, there we go, sometimes don't make a good connection. My $25 combo DVD recorder VHS machine. Okay, so looks like the tape was recorded out of spec. So the camera, when this tape was recorded, whatever camera recorded this had a problem. It's probably not this camera. I'll try making a recording on another tape and play it in the camera and see if it records or plays back properly. I have a tape here that should have color bars on it. And it does. Perfect. Let's see how these play. Let's see how the color bar tape plays on this. And there's a bit of an alignment problem still. See, my color bar tape's not playing perfect, so there is a problem with the camera. So let's see if we can at least get this color bar tape playing properly. Not only is this a Super VHS, it's also got hi-fi sound. It's kind of neat. This would have been I would say, a relatively expensive camera back in the day when it was around, when it was in production. 1992 is when this one was made. Gotta figure out what screws got to come out to get the machine apart, so I gotta get the front off of the camera so that I can get at the guides to do an alignment, because the guideposts that need to be adjusted are well, they're threaded way up front here once the tape is threaded. Okay, the left side cover comes off. You have to unplug a few things like the viewfinder and blue cable up top here that goes up to something. And there's one more plug that I think has got to come out. Where's that one go? That one goes around the front here. Okay, now the side cover's off. A lot of work to get into these things. You gotta take out every single screw pretty much, because to take off the front nose cone, there's a bracket in here that comes off. This top piece should lift out now, but I gotta take the microphone's gotta come out, and it's held in place by, there's a couple screws in the front. This is just to get to the tape transport, just to do any adjustments on it. And what else is there? Oh, there's another bracket up here, and this should lift off now. I'm thinking at this stage of the game, I'm just going to put this one back together, because the amount of disassembly required to get this side cabinet open, to get at that guide, the entire camera has to be stripped down, and I'm just not going to go there, because I couldn't charge the guy enough to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the alignment as close as I can, working through the side of the camera here. I can adjust the guides. It's going to be a process of turning it a bit and then playing the tape back, and then turning it a bit more and playing the tape back. That's about the only way that I can see to do this without total disassembly. And then once the camera is totally disassembled, how am I going to operate it if I've got things disconnected? If I've got plugs undone, how am I going to operate the thing to test it? These cameras were ones that were typically, I never worked on one of these in the time that I was in the business. If it was one of these palmcorders, we sent them off to Panasonic and said, here, you guys built this piece of crap, you guys deal with it. Because they didn't build them like Sony did, where they were serviceable. The Sony cameras at least were serviceable. You could get into them and you could work on them. But this thing here is just an absolute joke. If you saw how they've got little modules just stuffed in between the board, like this, for example. You know, it's like an afterthought. There's, where is it here? Here it is. Look at this. There's just a little module that's just stuffed in the board here, right? Little add-on boards, like this. Just a little module, a little circuit board that's wrapped up in heat shrink and stuffed down in between. It's not even anchored to anything. It's just stuffed in. This is the way they put these things together. It was just junk. Cram so much stuff into here that it makes them impossible to work on. And then you're spending hours and hours and hours trying to get at something, to do something really minor, like trying to change a gear, one of the little gears in this thing. People were, well, we never fixed any because the cost of fixing them was so high that people would just buy a new one. Oh, it's fun getting those plugs pushed back in. There's not enough slack on any of them. I still don't understand why people want to fix this old crap, especially something like this. I don't know. I just don't. I don't get it. I can understand an 8mm camera, why someone wants to fix an 8mm camera, because you need an 8mm player to play the tapes back on. But something like this, you take the tapes out, you put them in the play pack, and you put them on a regular VHS machine or Super VHS machine. There's no reason, none whatsoever, for fixing one of these old beat-up pieces of junk. These weren't worth fixing when they were still in production. Something major happened on one of these ones, you tossed it out and got a new one.
Now, what I understand is the guy that owns this, he bought it. He recently just bought this because he wanted to record some stuff in an old format, and it didn't work when he got it. So not only has he wasted his money buying it, but he's also, spent a bunch of money shipping it to me, and a good chance I'm not going to be able to get anything working on this.
Now, I know I'm going to get comments from people when I say I don't understand why anybody would want to use one of these things, and they're going to tell me they want to use an old standard definition camcorder to get the look. And You can get the look with filters. That's all I'm going to say on that, is you can get the look with filters with modern equipment.
That plus the fact that you're talking a 30-year-old camera and tapes that are just as old. So I don't understand the logic of why anybody still wants to use videotape camcorders for anything. The quality wasn't there 30 years ago and it's no better now. I mean, I wonder the same thing with audio tape as well, though, why anybody wants to still use audio tape, because the modern technologies are so much better. And if you want that scratchy, grainy look, you can apply it in filters and make it look exactly the same. Make it look as bad as you want with filters.
As you can see, I took out tons of screws on this thing, and I still wasn't to the point where I could get the whole camera apart. All those ribbon cables have to come apart. Just a very poor design. Oh, I got a phone call that says suspected spam. Well, that was interesting, because that actually was not a spam call, but it's somebody whose number has been reported as being a spam call. That's actually a client that was coming to pick up some equipment. So I've removed the side cover. I've removed the bottom plate from the side cover so that I could get the circuit board out of the way so I can actually do anything on here. I don't want to damage this, so because it doesn't unplug from here. But what I need to do is I need to adjust the take-up, or the take-up side guide, this one here. This is the one that's off a bit because the picture disturbances was at the bottom. I think it was at the bottom of the picture, or was it the top? Let me just take another look at it here and see. Make sure we get the right one. So, play. Where's the supply side? Where's my distortion? Yeah, my distortion is supposed to be at the bottom of the picture. So it's the right side guide. If we look here. So the noise is at the bottom of the picture, therefore it's the exit side guide that needs to be tweaked. Got a 1.5mm hex key. Oh, this guide's really loose. How about this one? Yeah, that one's loose too. This guide is really, really loose. That would explain why the alignment is off. I don't know which way it's off, so we're going to have to just try it and see whether it gets worse or gets better. This is going to be trial and error. This could take me a while to get this looking proper. Oh, well, what do you know? I turned it a half a turn, and it's almost there. Looks like it's now at the top of the picture, so that would be the entrance side. Might be off just a bit, so we'll just try moving this guide ever so slightly. We'll try a quarter of a turn. I go counterclockwise because, of course, with them being loose like this, the way that the tape would generally turn them would be clockwise. There should be a little lock set screws here to tighten these things down too, to hold them in place. That's looking pretty good. Well, I'm going to say this camera is probably shot. I think we've got more problems. Just it started acting up. Now it won't even stay on. I mean, I had it playing there for a while, and I actually had a good picture on it, but it just shut down, and it won't even stay on now. Either mode, either camera or VCR, it comes on for a few seconds and then shuts off. I'm watching the current draw. It goes up to about 1.6 amps at 6 volts. And then shuts off. It will not load the tape.
The only thing I can do is eject. I had the alignment pretty close there. In fact, I actually had it playing properly, and I had it playing for a while, and then it just shut off. I get the sneaking suspicion that probably some of those surface-mounted capacitors now have started leaking onto the board and are failing. Maybe something in the power supply, because it certainly won't. It won't stay on now. See, it just shuts off. Even without a tape, it just shuts off. Does it say anything in the viewfinder here? Battery. Okay, it's saying that the battery is low, like it's detecting low voltage, but it's getting 6 volts on the power supply. I'll give it 7 volts and see whether, I don't want to take it any more than that, see whether it's still showing as low battery. Yep, battery. So something has gone wrong with this thing, probably in the DC to DC converter. I'm going to say capacitors are going bad on this thing. I'm going to walk away from this one at this point. It's just not worth. It's not worth spending any money on, any time on it. It's 1992. 9-year-old camcorder. No, I'm not spending any time on it. I'm going to get a hold of the guy and tell him, hey, you know, this thing is not worth fixing. And wash my hands of it and be done. Like a lot of these cameras of this era, they weren't worth fixing. They weren't worth fixing when they were new, when they were still around. These things weren't worth fixing. But now that they're now that they're as old as they are, they're definitely not worth fixing. So there it is, back together. I've given up on this. It's not worth fixing. Like the majority of camcorders, they're just not worth fixing. Stop playing around with this old technology. This stuff here is this stuff was marginal when it was new. As far as reliability goes, it hasn't gotten better with age. Thanks for watching.